The fluorescent lights of St. Michael's Medical Center hummed with that particular frequency that made everything feel sterile, cold, impersonal. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in Virginia, and the emergency department had settled into its usual late shift rhythm, the quiet before the storm that veteran nurses could feel in their bones. Catherine Hayes stood in the corner of Trauma Bay 4, methodically restocking IV bags on a metal cart. At 52 years old, she
In
moved with
critical
a deliberate,
situations,
almost plodding
every
pace
second
that drove
counts.
the younger
You need
staff
to
insane.
assess and
Her
act with
gray-streaked hair
precision.
was pulled back into an unfashionable bun. Her scrubs hung loose on a frame that looked tired, worn down by decades of something the others couldn't quite identify. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked expiration dates. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but to the sharp-eyed residents who watched her with barely concealed contempt, it was a neon sign of incompetence. "Check them again, Hayes, doctor." Preston Chase called out from the nurse's station, not bothering to look up from his tablet. He was 32, devastatingly handsome in that sharp, calculated way that came from expensive grooming and unlimited confidence. His white coat was pristine, his stethoscope gleaming like a piece of jewelry. He was the son of Senator Robert Chase, and he made damn sure everyone knew it. "I checked them 10 minutes ago, doctor," Catherine said, her voice raspy, like she'd spent too many years breathing dust and smoke. "Then check them again," Preston said, finally glancing up with a smirk. He winked at Lily Park, the young nurse beside him, who spent more time perfecting her makeup than monitoring vitals. "We can't have Grandma here forgetting to read labels. Old age does that, you know. Memory goes first." Lily giggled, covering her mouth with manicured fingers. "Dr. Chase, you're terrible." "I'm cautious," Preston said loudly, ensuring his voice carried across the entire department. "HR keeps sending us these charity cases. I mean, look at her hands. They shake. How is she supposed to start an IV when she can't even hold a syringe steady?" Catherine's knuckles went white as she gripped the saline bag. She didn't respond. She had been at St. Michael's for exactly 3 weeks, and in that time she'd learned that silence was her only defense. They treated her like a glorified janitor who happened to have an RN license, a relic from a different era of medicine, before computers and protocols and corporate efficiency metrics. "I heard she worked at some rural clinic in Nebraska," Dr. Vincent Cruz whispered to another resident, though his voice carried easily. "Probably put Band-Aids on scraped knees for 30 years. Now she thinks she can handle level 1 trauma." Preston stood up, smoothing his immaculate white coat. "She won't last. I give it 2 more days. One real emergency, one massive hemorrhage, and she'll faint. Then we can get her out of here and bring in someone who actually belongs in the 21st century." Catherine finished stocking the cart. She walked past them, eyes fixed on the polished linoleum floor. She wasn't deaf. Every word burned like acid, but they were nothing compared to the phantom sensations she sometimes felt: the heat of burning metal, the grit of desert sand, the weight of a dying soldier in her arms. She made her way to the break room, poured herself a cup of stale coffee from a pot that had been sitting for hours, and sat alone at the table farthest from the door. Her right knee throbbed a dull ache that intensified when the weather changed. Shrapnel wound, Helmand's Province, 2014. The surgeons had gotten most of it out, but not all. "Just keep your head down, Catherine," she whispered to herself, rubbing the knee through her scrubs. "You need this pension. You need the quiet." But the quiet was about to shatter. The klaxon didn't just ring. It screamed. It was the specific two-tone alarm that signaled a mass casualty event involving active duty personnel. "Code Black, ETA 3 minutes. All surgical teams to the bay. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The atmosphere in the hospital shifted instantly. The casual mockery vanished, replaced by controlled chaos. Doors slammed open. Footsteps thundered down hallways. Voices shouted coordinates and protocols. Preston was already moving, his arrogance transforming into command mode. "All right, people, let's move. We have incoming from Joint Base Andrews, Special Operations Transport. That means high-value targets in heavy trauma." He pointed at Lily. "Get the blood bank on the line. Cruise Prep Bay 1. His eyes found Catherine emerging from the break room. "Hayes, you stay out of the way. Go manage the waiting room or something. I don't want you tripping over cords when real work starts." "I'm trauma-certified doctor," Catherine said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I don't care what piece of paper you have," Preston snapped. "This is a SEAL team, extraction gone wrong. High-velocity rounds, shrapnel, potential blast injuries. This isn't a flu shot clinic. Stay out of the way." He didn't wait for an answer. He spun on his heel and rushed toward the ambulance bay doors, his team falling in behind him like disciples following a prophet. Catherine stood there for a heartbeat, the old instinct flaring up in her chest, the urge to run toward the fire to do what she'd been trained to do. But she swallowed it down, forced it back into the box where she kept all the other dangerous parts of herself. She stepped back against the wall, near the scrub sinks, making herself invisible, just another piece of hospital furniture. The double doors exploded open with a violent crash that made everyone flinch. The noise was deafening. Paramedics were shouting vitals over the case ESAs. Gurneys rattled and clanged against doorframes. The metallic smell of fresh blood filled the air instantly, that copper tang that Catherine knew better than her own perfume. Male 30s, multiple GSWs to chest and abdomen, a paramedic screamed. Male 20s, blast amputation left leg, another yelled. And then in the center of the chaos, surrounded by 4 military police officers and 2 frantic flight medics, came the gurney that made everyone stop and stare. Make a whole move, a medic screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. We have the HVT high-value target, Commander Ryan Foster, SEAL Team 6. He took a sniper round to the upper thoracic cavity and shrapnel to the neck. BP is 70/40 and dropping fast. Preston was on him instantly, his hands moving with practiced precision. Get him to Bay 1. I want a thoracotomy tray open now. Type in crossmatch for 6 units and somebody page anesthesia. The man on the gurney was massive, even pale from blood loss. Commander Ryan Foster looked like he'd been carved from granite by an angry god. His tactical vest had been cut away, revealing a torso matted with blood and gauze that was already soaked through. His eyes were fluttering, rolling back into his head, fighting to stay conscious. Catherine watched from her position against the wall. She saw the way blood was pulsing from the neck wound, dark red venous controllable. But the chest wound, that was different. That was the problem. She took a half step forward, her eyes tracking details that everyone else was missing. The trauma team swarmed Commander Foster like ants on honey. Preston was shouting orders, trying to intubate. He's fighting the tube push 100 of succinylcholine. Hold him down. Foster was thrashing, even half dead. His survival instinct was violent, primal. He grabbed Dr. Cruz's wrist with a bloody hand, his grip like a vice crushing. Restrain him, Preston yelled, sweat already beading on his forehead. He can't breathe, you idiot, Catherine whispered to herself so quietly no one could hear. He can't breathe because you're not looking at the right thing. She watched the monitor. The oxygen saturation wasn't coming up even with the bag valve mask. His heart rate was climbing, tachycardia, the body's desperate attempt to compensate. But his blood pressure was narrowing, the gap between systolic and diastolic shrinking. Classic signs. Preston was fixated on the neck wound, trying to control bleeding that wasn't the immediate threat. It's a jugular nick, clamp it. We need to stop the bleeding before we secure the airway. Doctor, Catherine said, the word escaping before she could stop it. Preston ignored her. I said clamp it. Can someone get this guy's arm down? Cruz, you're supposed to be strong. Hold him still. Dr. Chase. Catherine's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. The room went silent for a microsecond. Preston whipped his head around, his face flushed with fury and adrenaline. Get her out of here, security. He has a tension pneumothorax, Catherine said, her voice dropping to a low commanding register that didn't match the timid grandmother persona they'd all dismissed. Look at the tracheal deviation. It's shifting left. You're trying to intubate a collapsed lung. You're going to kill him in 30 seconds. Preston stared at her, his eyes wide with fury. Who the hell do you think you are? I am the attending trauma surgeon here. You are a nurse who can barely restock a cart. Get out, now. Look at his neck, Catherine said, pointing. Not at the bleeding wound, but at the throat structure itself. Under the harsh overhead lights, barely visible beneath the grime of war and blood, Commander Foster's windpipe was pushed slightly to the left. His chest on the right side wasn't moving at all. His right, Cruz stammered, looking at the patient with new eyes. Preston, look. No breath sounds on the right. Distended neck veins. Preston hesitated. In trauma medicine, hesitation is death. His ego was wrestling with the visual evidence right in front of him. If he listened to the old nurse, he looked weak. If he didn't, the patient died. It's just swelling from the shrapnel, Preston said, doubling down his pride, winning the battle over logic. Proceed with intubation. If we don't secure the airway, he dies anyway. Push the drugs. No, Catherine said, and then she moved. She didn't run like the younger nurses. She moved with efficient, explosive power that belonged to someone else, someone who'd been sleeping into this tired body. She bypassed the scrub line, grabbing a 14-gauge angiocath needle from the open tray with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Security, stop her, Preston screamed. But Catherine was already at the bedside. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't check the chart. She didn't hesitate. She placed her left hand on Commander Foster's chest, feeling for the second intercostal space mid-clavicular line. It was a motion she'd performed in the backs of Blackhawks, in dusty tents under mortar fire, in places where hesitation meant death. "Don't you touch him." Preston lunged at her. Catherine dropped her shoulder, checking him with a rigid elbow that sent the young doctor stumbling backward into a tray of instruments. It wasn't a push. It was a tactical block, the kind of move that came from years of close-quarters training. In the same fluid motion, she drove the needle into Foster's chest. The sound was audible throughout the room. Hiss, the trapped air escaped with a violent rush, releasing the pressure that had been crushing Commander Foster's heart and good lung. The tension pneumothorax, the killer that Preston had missed, decompressed instantly. The monitor changed. The frantic beeping slowed. The oxygen saturation numbers began to tick upward. 80, 85, 90. Commander Ryan Foster gasped a massive, ragged intake of air that sounded like resurrection. His eyes snapped open. He was no longer thrashing in blind panic. He was breathing. Really breathing. The room was frozen in suspended animation. Preston was picking himself up off the floor, his face a mask of shock and rage. The other nurses were staring at Catherine as if she'd sprouted wings. Cruz's mouth was hanging open. Catherine didn't look at any of them. Her hand was still on Foster's chest, stabilizing the needle. She looked down at the patient, and that was when he saw her. His vision was blurry, swimming with drugs and pain, and the fink of near death. He saw the white ceiling, the blinding lights, the faces of strangers hovering over him. But then he locked eyes with the woman holding the needle in his chest. He blinked, squinted, tried to focus through the haze. Catherine's face was calm, professional, but there was something in her eyes, something ancient and knowing. "Breathe, Commander," she said softly. "I've got you. You're at St. Michael's. You're safe." Foster's lips moved. He was trying to speak, but the trauma was too great, his throat too raw. He lifted his right hand, the one that had been gripping Dr. Cruz's wrist in a death grip, and reached toward Catherine. Preston stormed back to the table, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. "You are finished," he hissed at Catherine, his voice trembling. "You assaulted a doctor. You performed an unauthorized procedure. You are done. I will have your license revoked before the sun comes up. Get away from my patient." "Wait," Cruz said softly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Look." Commander Foster wasn't pushing Catherine away. His bloodied hand had found the fabric of her scrub top. He wasn't grabbing her in aggression. He was gripping her sleeve like a lifeline, pulling her closer. His eyes were intense, searching her face with desperate recognition. He whispered one word, choked and raspy, but audible enough for the surgical team to hear. "Angel." Catherine's stoic mask cracked for just a fraction of a second. Her eyes softened, and something like pain flashed across her face. "I'm here, Ryan," she whispered. "I'm here." Preston looked between them, confusion mixing with fury. "What is going on? Do you know this woman?" Commander Foster didn't look at Preston. He didn't look at the expensive equipment or the credentials hanging on the walls. He kept his eyes locked on Catherine. With monumental effort, every muscle screaming in protest, he released her scrub and tried to shift his body. He winced in agony but forced his arm up. Slowly, shakily, the commander of a Navy SEAL team brought his hand to his brow. He saluted her. It wasn't casual. It wasn't weak. It was a formal, lingering salute of absolute respect, the kind of salute a soldier gives to someone who saved his life. Catherine didn't salute back. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was a nurse. But she nodded, a single sharp nod of acknowledgement that spoke volumes. "At ease, Commander," she said quietly. "Let us work." Foster's hand dropped. His body finally relaxed as the anesthesia took him under, but a faint smile lingered on his lips, the smile of a man who'd just been found by someone he thought he'd lost forever. Preston stood there, his mouth agape. The silence in the room was suffocating. "What?" he whispered. "What the hell just happened?" Catherine turned to face him. The shaky, timid grandmother was gone. In her place stood someone cold, hard, and infinitely more dangerous than the young doctor had ever imagined. "He's stable," Catherine said, her voice flat and emotionless. "Do your job, doctor. Fix the neck wound. I'll prep the chest tube." She paused, her eyes boring into him. "And if you shout at me again while a patient is dying, I'll break your finger." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Preston opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He had no response. For the first time in his privileged life, he was genuinely afraid. Catherine turned back to Foster, her hands moving with practiced efficiency to secure the needle and prepare for the next phase of treatment. Around her, the trauma team slowly came back to life, following her lead despite Preston's official authority. Lily stared at Catherine with new eyes. Cruz was smiling slightly, a knowing expression that suggested he'd suspected something like this all along. Even the paramedics who'd brought Foster in were watching Catherine with respect. Preston backed away, his face pale. He pulled out his phone and started typing furiously. Probably to his father, probably to hospital administration, probably to anyone who would listen to his tale of assault and insubordination. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, Commander Ryan Foster was breathing. His oxygen saturation was 98%. His blood pressure was stabilizing. The chest tube was draining properly. Catherine had done what she always did. She'd kept someone alive when everything was trying to kill them. As the team worked to stabilize Foster for surgery, Catherine caught Lily staring at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. The young nurse opened her mouth to ask a question, but Catherine shook her head slightly. Not now, not here. 2 hours later, after Foster had been wheeled into surgery and the immediate crisis had passed, Catherine found herself sitting in a plush leather chair that felt too soft, too expensive. She was in the hospital administration wing, that place where the real power lived, far from the blood and screaming in offices with mahogany desks and corporate art on the walls. Across from her sat David Morrison, the hospital administrator, a man who cared more about liability insurance than patient care. Next to him was Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, the director of nursing, a woman who looked genuinely pained by the situation. And on the other side of the table, Preston Chase had cleaned up, changed into a crisp navy suit, and looked like the picture of medical authority. Catherine was still in her soiled scrubs. There was a smear of Commander Foster's blood on her sleeve that had dried to a rust color. They hadn't allowed her to change. They'd escorted her straight from the operating room to this conference room like a criminal. "This is a clear-cut case of gross misconduct," Preston said, leaning back in his chair with false casualness. He tapped a gold pen against the table. "She not only insubordinately interrupted a critical procedure, but she also physically assaulted an attending physician. I have a bruise on my chest, Mr. Morrison. She elbowed me." Morrison looked over his glasses at Catherine. "Ms. Hayes, is this true? Did you strike Dr. Chase?" "I blocked him," Catherine said quietly, looking at her hands, those shaking hands that had been rock steady when it mattered. He was about to interfere with a life-saving procedure. "I neutralized the threat to the patient." Preston scoffed, a cruel laugh escaping him. "Listen to her. Neutralize the threat. She thinks she's in an action movie. You're a nurse, Hayes, a geriatric nurse at that. You are not a surgeon. You are not a trauma specialist. You stuck a needle into the chest of a high-value military asset without authorization. If I hadn't stepped in to fix the damage, Commander Foster would be dead." Catherine looked up slowly. Her eyes were tired, dark circles carved deep beneath them. "The commander is stable, isn't he? His oxygen stats are 99%. His lung reinflated. The chest tube is draining perfectly." "That is due to my team's follow-up," Preston lied smoothly. "We had to clean up your mess. You got lucky, Hayes, blind luck. But luck isn't a medical strategy. You are a liability." He leaned forward. "Imagine if you had punctured his heart. The lawsuit would bankrupt this hospital." Mrs. Blackwood looked pained. "Catherine, you have to understand the protocol. You went outside your scope of practice. You can't just stab patients." "He was dying," Catherine said, her voice hardening. "He had a tension pneumothorax. Dr. Chase was treating a neck wound while the patient suffocated. Protocol doesn't matter when the patient is turning blue." "And that's exactly the cowboy attitude we can't have," Morrison said, slamming a file shut with theatrical finality. "Ms. Hayes, Dr. Chase is the chief resident. His judgment is the final word in that trauma bay. By overriding him, you undermine the hierarchy of this institution." Morrison slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a termination notice, the words printed in cold corporate typeface. "Effective immediately, your employment at St. Michael's is terminated for cause," Morrison said. "We will be reporting this incident to the State Nursing Board. You will likely lose your license, Ms. Hayes. Security will escort you to your locker to collect your personal effects." Preston smirked. It was subtle, a slight curl of his lip, but it was there, the smile of victory, the expression of a man who'd just eliminated a witness to his incompetence. Catherine stared at the paper. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She'd been fired from better places than this. She'd been fired upon by snipers in the Hindu Kush. A piece of paper from a bureaucrat in a suit didn't scare her. "Fine," Catherine whispered. She stood up her knee, popping with a loud crack that made everyone flinch. She winced, grabbed the edge of the table for support, and straightened her back. "I have one question," Catherine said, looking directly at Preston. "Make it quick," Preston said, checking his Rolex. "When you go check on him, when you look Commander Foster in the eye," Catherine said, her voice dropping to a low, intense timbre, "are you going to tell him that you were the one who saved him? Are you going to steal that valor, Doctor?" Preston's face flushed red. "Get out." Catherine turned and walked to the door. She didn't look back. She walked with that same slow, plodding limp that they'd all mocked. But as she left the office, the air in the room felt lighter, as if a heavy, dangerous presence had just departed. "Good riddance," Preston muttered once she was gone. "Now I have to go deal with the family. Apparently Foster comes from a military dynasty. I need to make sure they know their son was in the best hands." He had no idea that the family arriving wasn't just a mother and father. It was the United States government. Catherine walked down the empty hallway toward her locker, her footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Security guards followed at a respectful distance, uncomfortable with their assignment. When she reached the locker room, she opened her small metal locker and pulled out a cardboard box someone had left on the bench. Inside the locker, hanging in the back, was an old field jacket, olive drab, faded by years and sun, with patches sewn onto the shoulders. She ran her fingers over the embroidered insignia, 75th Ranger Regiment. Beneath it, folded carefully, was a citation for the Distinguished Service Cross. She left them there. Those belonged to someone else, someone who died in the desert. Catherine packed her meager belongings into the box, a cracked coffee mug that said, "World's okayest nurse," a stethoscope she'd bought with her own money because the hospital-issued ones were garbage, and a small dying succulent plant that had somehow survived 3 weeks in this fluorescent hell. She walked out through the emergency department. It was 2:30 a.m. now, and the chaos had settled. Lily was at the nurse's station, and when she saw Catherine, she stood up quickly. "Miss Hayes, Catherine shook her head. "It's okay, Lily. You have a career here. Protect it." "But what you did doesn't matter," Catherine said. "Take care of the patients. That's all that matters." She pushed through the doors and walked into the cold Virginia night. The rain had started, a freezing drizzle that cut through her thin scrubs. She walked to the bus stop, sat on the bench, and waited. The number 42 bus arrived 15 minutes later, smelling of wet wool and diesel. Catherine climbed aboard, paid her fare, and made her way to the very last row. She squeezed into the corner seat, clutching her pathetic cardboard box. As the bus pulled away from St. Michael's Medical Center, Catherine stared out the rain-streaked window. The gray cityscape of Arlington blurred into streaks of concrete and regret. "It's over," she told herself. The thought wasn't angry. It was just a heavy, suffocating fact. For 10 years, Catherine had lived as a ghost. She had buried Dusty, the legend, the operator, the woman who had performed surgery in the backs of burning Humvees, deep inside this shell of a middle-aged invisible woman. She had traded the adrenaline of combat for the safety of anonymity. But the warrior in her hadn't died. It had just been sleeping. And tonight it had woken up just long enough to save a life and ruin hers. Catherine closed her eyes and let the vibration of the bus engine rattle through her bones. Somewhere in the city, Commander Ryan Foster was in surgery, alive because she'd refused to stay silent. Somewhere in that hospital, Preston Chase was probably already spinning the story, making himself the hero. The bus driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Next stop, 4th and Main, transfer to the Blue Line." Catherine opened her eyes and stared at her reflection in the dark window. For just a moment, she saw someone else staring back, a younger woman in combat fatigues, eyes hard as diamonds, hands steady on a rifle. Then the moment passed, and she was just Catherine again. The bus lurched to a stop at 4th and Main, and Catherine gathered her cardboard box, preparing for the cold walk to her apartment. But as she stood, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it. At 2:47 a.m., nothing good came from answering unknown numbers. But something made her look at the screen. The number wasn't unknown. It was blocked, showing only "restricted call" in stark letters. In her old life, that had meant one thing: someone from the world she'd left behind. Catherine pressed the phone to her ear. "Hayes." The voice on the other end was familiar, warm like aged bourbon, but carrying an edge of urgency. "Catherine, it's been a long time." She went very still. The other passengers shuffled past her, annoyed at the woman blocking the aisle. "General Stone," she said quietly. "I'm retired, sir." "I'm aware, but we have a situation. Commander Foster, the man you saved tonight, he was part of a classified operation. An operation that went very wrong. And Catherine, someone tried to kill him again, in his hospital room, about 20 minutes ago." Catherine's hand tightened on the phone. Through the bus window, she could see the rain falling harder now, washing the city streets clean of everything except the truth. Tell me, Foster was transporting evidence, documents proving corruption in defense contracts, $2 billion in fraudulent spending. Catherine goes all the way to Congress. If he testifies, 40 people go to prison. If he dies, the evidence chain breaks. Why are you calling me, sir? Because Foster is asking for you. Because he won't talk to our medics. Because when he woke up from anesthesia, the first thing he said was your name. Stone paused. And because someone got past hospital security, past military police, and nearly succeeded in injecting succinylcholine into his IV line. That takes training, inside knowledge. This is someone from our world, Catherine. The bus driver called back, "Lady, you getting off or what?" Catherine stepped off the bus into the rain. She stood on the corner, the water soaking through her scrubs, the cardboard box growing soft in her arms. "Sir, I haven't been in the field in 10 years. I'm a civilian nurse. I just got fired. I'm nobody." "You saved Ryan Foster twice, Catherine. Once in Helmand Province in 2014 and once tonight. He trusts you, and right now, trust is the only currency that matters." Stone's voice softened. "I need you to keep him alive while we figure out who burned him. And I need you to do it quietly. The hospital can't know. Your former administrator can't know. This is off book." Catherine looked down at her hands. In the streetlight, she could see the tremor, the slight shake that came from nerve damage, and too many memories. But she also saw the scars, the calluses, the evidence of a life spent pulling people back from the edge of death. "When do I start?" "There's a car 3 blocks east of your position. Black SUV, it will take you to Foster's location. He's being moved to a secure facility as we speak." "General, what facility can you trust if the conspiracy goes as high as you say?" Stone chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "That's why I called you Catherine. Because the safest place for Ryan Foster right now isn't a military hospital. It's wherever you are." The line went dead. Catherine stood in the rain for a long moment, then dropped the cardboard box into a nearby dumpster. Everything in it belonged to the life she'd tried to build, the quiet life, the safe life. That life was over. She walked 3 blocks east and found the SUV exactly where Stone had said it would be. The back door opened as she approached. Inside, a young man in civilian clothes with a military haircut nodded at her. "Colonel Hayes, I'm Agent Torres, NCIS. General Stone sends his regards. There's dry clothes in the back seat and a briefing packet. We're wheels up in 15 minutes. Catherine climbed in. "Where are we going?" "Old VA hospital wing on the east side. Buildings have been condemned for 3 years, but the structure is sound. We've set up a secure room. MPs on rotation, medical equipment, and enough supplies to keep Commander Foster stable for 72 hours while we sort this out." As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Catherine opened the briefing packet. Inside were photographs, documents, and a USB drive labeled Eyes Only. The first photograph showed a younger Ryan Foster in dress uniform receiving a medal. The second showed a convoy of vehicles in the desert smoke rising from burning metal. The third photograph made her breath catch. It was a picture she'd never seen before, but she remembered the moment it captured. Helmand Province 2014. A Black Hawk helicopter with its side door open. A medic, Catherine Younger Harder, leaning over a wounded soldier, her hands buried in his chest cavity, holding something together that wanted to fall apart. The soldier's face was visible. Ryan Foster, 28 years old. Conscious, staring up at her with absolute trust. Someone had been there with a camera. Someone had documented the moment she'd saved his life the first time. "He kept that photo," Agent Torres said quietly. "In his footlocker. He called you the silent guardian. Said you appeared out of nowhere, did the impossible, and vanished before he could even thank you." Catherine closed the folder. "I was just doing my job." "With all due respect, ma'am, I've read your file. What you did that day wasn't just your job. You held Lieutenant Foster's subclavian artery closed with your bare hand for 6 hours while the evac was delayed. You were taking fire the entire time. You sustained shrapnel wounds to your left hand and right leg, and you refused extraction until Foster was stable. Like I said, my job." Torres smiled slightly. "He's going to be happy to see you." The VA hospital loomed out of the darkness like a tombstone, a relic from another era when the government actually funded veteran care. The building was dark, condemned signs posted on the doors, but Catherine could see light from one window on the 3rd floor. They entered through a service entrance, the MP stationed there checking eyes and weapons before allowing them through. The hallways smelled of disinfectant and decay, but the secure room on the 3rd floor was different. Someone had brought in modern medical equipment monitors that beeped softly and IV stand portable oxygen. And in the hospital bed propped up on pillows was Commander Ryan Foster. He looked better than he had in the trauma bay, but not by much. His chest was heavily bandaged, a chest tube snaking out from between his ribs into a drainage container. His neck was wrapped in gauze. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert, tracking movement with the awareness of a man who'd spent his life in dangerous places. When Catherine walked through the door, those eyes locked onto her and didn't let go. "Angel," he whispered, his voice rough from intubation. "You came." Catherine moved to his bedside, her nurse instincts taking over. She checked his vitals on the monitor, examined the chest tube output, assessed his breathing. "Your oxygen saturation is good. Pain level manageable." He reached out and caught her wrist gently. "Catherine Hayes, I finally know your name." "You should rest, Commander." "Ryan, please. After what we've been through, I think we're past rank and formality." He smiled, wincing slightly at the pain it caused. "I thought I'd never see you again. After Hellman, after you saved me, you just disappeared. I looked for you, spent months trying to find the medic who pulled me back from hell. But you'd retired, vanished, changed your name." "I needed to disappear," Catherine said quietly. She pulled up a chair and sat down her knee, grateful for the rest. "I'd seen enough death. I wanted peace. And instead, you found me bleeding out in a hospital in Virginia." Ryan laughed, then coughed, pain flashing across his face. "God has a sense of humor." "Tell me what happened," Catherine said. "The operation, the ambush, why someone wants you dead." Ryan's expression darkened. "It was supposed to be a milk run, training exercise, they said. My team was tasked with securing a location and extracting a package. But when we arrived, the coordinates were wrong. We walked into a kill box. 50 cal fire from 3 positions. RPGs. It was a professional hit, Catherine. Not insurgents, not random. Someone changed our coordinates and sent us into an ambush. The package you were extracting, the evidence General Stone mentioned. Documents proving that Defense Corp Solutions, one of the largest military contractors in the country, has been billing the government for equipment, never delivered services, never rendered soldiers, never trained. $2 billion over 15 years. And the corruption goes deep. Pentagon officials, Congressional Defense Committee members, even some of our own commanders. Catherine felt the pieces clicking together. You were never supposed to make it back. I survived the ambush. My team didn't. I was the only one extracted. And when I woke up in that hospital, someone was there. I couldn't see his face, but I felt wrong. My combat instinct was screaming. I hit the call button and he ran. The nurse found a syringe in my IV port. Succinylcholine. Untraceable if it works. Looks like cardiac arrest. Clean and simple. Military training, inside knowledge. Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark city. Ryan, if the conspiracy is as deep as you say, if it reaches into the Pentagon and Congress, then nowhere is safe. They have resources, connections, time. They'll keep coming until you're dead. I know. His voice was steady, accepting. That's why Stone asked for you. Because you're not part of the system anymore. You're not in any database, not on any roster. You're a ghost, Catherine. The silent guardian. And right now, I need a guardian more than I need a hospital. Catherine turned back to face him. In the dim light, he looked young, vulnerable, a soldier who'd survived one battle only to face another. I can keep you alive for 72 hours. Maybe longer if we're careful. But Ryan, I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm a nurse. If they send trained killers, if they send a team. You blocked a doctor and decompressed my chest without hesitation, Ryan said. You moved like someone who's been in combat. I know what that looks like, Catherine. Is you can say you're not a soldier anymore, but soldiers don't retire. We just change uniforms. Before Catherine could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from General Stone. Surveillance detected. 3 individuals casing the building. MP alert issued. Recommend internal lockdown. Catherine showed the message to Ryan. His face hardened. They found me faster than I expected. How long since you arrived here? 90 minutes. Then they didn't track you. They tracked me. Catherine felt ice run through her veins. The termination meeting. Preston Chase. He knew about you, knew you were high value. What if he's not just an arrogant doctor? What if he's part of this? Ryan tried to sit up, wincing. Chase? Preston Chase. His father is Senator Robert Chase. Senator Chase sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He oversees defense appropriations. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Preston had access to your medical records. He knew when you arrived what condition you were in. He could have been the one who tried to poison your IV. And when you saved me, when you proved you were competent and observant, you became a threat. Catherine moved quickly, checking the room's exits. One door, one window, 3 floors up. The MPs were stationed at the main entrance and the service door. If trained killers were coming, they'd bypass the obvious entry points. Ryan, I need you to trust me. Can you move? I can try. We're not staying here. This room is a trap. Too many access points, too predictable. Catherine pulled out her phone and dialed Stone's number. He answered immediately. Catherine, we have eyes on 3 suspects approaching the building. General, this location is compromised. I'm moving Foster. Do not, I repeat, do not let your MPs engage. If these are professionals, a firefight will draw attention we can't afford. Where will you take him? Catherine thought fast. Where could she go that the conspiracy wouldn't think to look? Somewhere off the grid, somewhere that didn't show up on any official list. And then it hit her. Sir, do you remember Carlos Rivera? Stone was quiet for a moment. Doc Rivera, retired Ranger medic. You served together. He runs an underground clinic for veterans who can't afford VA care. It's not on any official record. Just a basement in Alexandria, cash only, no questions asked. They'd never think to look there. That's insane, Catherine. Rivera's clinic isn't equipped for this level of care. Neither is this abandoned hospital. At least Rivera's place is truly off the grid, and Sir Carlos still has connections. Old soldiers who owe him favors. If I need backup, if I need people I can trust, that's where I'll find them. Stone was silent for a long moment. I'll arrange transport. Black van, no markings at the service entrance in 5 minutes. Catherine, once you go dark, I can't help you. If things go wrong, I know, sir, this is off book, deniable. You were never involved. That's not what I was going to say. I was going to say don't die. The military has lost enough good soldiers. We can't afford to lose you again. Catherine ended the call and turned to Ryan. Time to move, Commander. Can you walk? For you, I'll run a marathon. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, grimacing as the movement pulled at his chest tube. Catherine was there, immediately supporting him, helping him stand. She disconnected him from the monitors, silenced the alarms, and carefully secured his chest tube to his body with medical tape. She grabbed a bag of supplies, pain medication, antibiotics, bandages, saline, and threw it over her shoulder. There's a service stairwell at the end of the hall. We take it down to the basement exit through the loading dock. The van will be there. What about the MPs? They'll cover our exit. But Ryan, if shooting starts, if anyone engages, we keep moving. No heroics. Your testimony is more important than any single firefight. They made it to the door when the lights went out. The entire building plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a hellish red glow. From somewhere below, Catherine heard the sound of suppressed gunfire. Pop, 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 professional, controlled. They're inside, Ryan whispered. Catherine's training took over. She'd been in this position before, protecting a wounded soldier, outnumbered, outgunned, with nothing but her wits and her will to keep someone alive. The fear she'd been carrying, the uncertainty, the years of rust, all of it fell away. She was the silent guardian again. Stay behind me. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. And Ryan, if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? I'm a Navy SEAL, Catherine. I don't run from fights. You do when you're carrying evidence that can bring down a $2 billion conspiracy. Your pride doesn't matter. Your mission does. Now move. They entered the service stairwell. Catherine led the way, moving down the stairs as quickly as Ryan's condition would allow. His breathing was labored, his face pale with pain and exertion, but he kept pace. 2 floors down. 1 floor down. Ground floor. Catherine held up a hand. She heard footsteps above them, boots on concrete moving fast. Multiple targets, at least 3. They'd entered from the roof, the one approach she hadn't considered. She pushed Ryan into a supply closet, cramming them both into the darkness among mops and cleaning chemicals. Through the crack in the door, she watched 3 figures descend the stairs. They moved with tactical precision, weapons up, clearing corners, military training, special operations level. They passed the closet without stopping, heading down toward the basement where the MPs were stationed. Catherine waited until they were out of sight, then pulled Ryan out. Loading dock, now. They emerged into the cold night air. The black van was there, door open, engine running. Catherine helped Ryan into the back and climbed in after him. The van peeled away from the building just as gunfire erupted behind them, louder now, no longer suppressed. The MPs had engaged. Agent Torres was driving. Where to? Catherine gave him an address in Alexandria. And Torres, lose anyone following us. Use every evasion technique you know. Our lives depend on it. The van wove through the empty streets of Virginia, taking random turns, doubling back, using parking garages and alleys. 30 minutes later, they pulled up to what looked like an abandoned warehouse in a rundown section of Alexandria. Catherine helped Ryan out of the van. Torres, tell General Stone we're dark. He won't hear from us until this is over. Colonel Hayes, I'm supposed to stay with you. Provide security. You're supposed to be deniable. If you stay, you're evidence of Stone's involvement. Go. That's an order, Agent. Torres hesitated, then nodded. The van disappeared into the night. Catherine supported Ryan as they walked to a rusted metal door. She knocked 3 times, paused, knocked twice more. A code from another life. The door opened. Standing there was a man in his late 50s, built like a tank with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. Carlos Rivera, Doc Rivera to everyone who knew him. He took one look at Catherine, then at the wounded SEAL she was supporting, and smiled. Kate, been a long time, and I see you brought me a present. Carlos, I need help. Off the books, deep off the books. Come in, mi hermana. Mi casa es su casa, even if my casa is a basement clinic for broken soldiers. He helped them inside, closing and locking the door behind them. Let's take a look at your friend here. SEAL right, I can always tell. You guys have that look, like you've seen God and weren't impressed. Ryan laughed, then coughed. Close enough. The basement was larger than Catherine expected, divided into sections by curtains. Medical equipment lined the walls, old but functional. In various beds and chairs, Catherine saw other patients. Veterans missing limbs, dealing with addiction, suffering from wounds both visible and invisible. Carlos led them to a private room in the back, separated from the main area by an actual door. Inside was a proper hospital bed, monitors, supplies. My VIP suite, usually reserved for guys who really don't want the VA asking questions. Today it's yours. Catherine helped Ryan into the bed and immediately began assessing his condition. The transport had been hard on him. His chest tube had shifted slightly, and fresh blood stained his bandages. Carlos, I need... Say no more, but fine. He was already moving, gathering supplies with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. IV fluids, fresh bandages, pain management. Anything else? Security. If anyone comes looking for him, anyone at all, we need to know. Carlos pulled out his phone and sent a text. I've got friends, old Rangers guys from the neighborhood who owe me. This building will have eyes on it within the hour. Nobody gets in without us knowing. Ryan was fading, the adrenaline wearing off, exhaustion and pain pulling him under. Catherine adjusted his pain medication, checked his vitals, made sure everything was stable. Then she sat in the chair next to his bed and finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what she'd just done. She'd gone from fired nurse to fugitive in less than 6 hours. She was protecting a witness in a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. She'd assaulted a doctor, stolen a patient, and gone completely dark from military oversight. And somehow, for the first time in 10 years, she felt alive. Carlos brought her coffee, real coffee, not the hospital sludge. He sat across from her, studying her face. You want to tell me what's really going on, Kate? Not yet, for your own protection. That bad. Worse. He nodded, accepting it. You look different. Not just older. Different it, like you finally stopped running. I'm not running anymore, Carlos. I can't. That man in there, Ryan, he's counting on me, and I'm not going to let him down. Like you never let any of us down. Carlos raised his coffee cup in a toast to the silent guardian. Welcome back. Catherine touched her cup to his, and for a moment in that basement clinic, surrounded by broken soldiers and old friends, she felt something she hadn't felt in a decade. She felt like she belonged. Hours passed in quiet vigilance. Catherine dozed in her chair but never truly slept. Every sound, every creak of the building brought her to full alertness. Ryan slept fitfully, his body trying to heal from trauma that would have killed a lesser man. At 4:47 a.m., Catherine's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it and felt her blood go cold. It was a photograph of the clinic's exterior, taken from across the street. The message below read, "We know where you are. Surrender Foster by 6 a.m. or we come in." Carlos appeared in the doorway, his own phone in hand. Got the same message. They're not bluffing, Kate. I count at least 4 positions around the building. Professional setup, overwatch blocking positions, probably a breacher team ready to go. Catherine stood and moved to the small window. Through the gap in the curtains, she could see the first hints of dawn touching the Alexandria skyline. Somewhere out there, trained killers were watching, waiting, preparing to storm this building and eliminate everyone inside. How many patients do you have here right now? She asked. 7, plus Ryan, and all of them veterans who can't go to the VA, who can't afford real care, who have nowhere else to go. Carlos's voice was hard. I'm not letting them become collateral damage, Kate. Neither am I. Catherine pulled out her phone and called the one person who might be able to help. General Marcus Stone answered on the first ring. Catherine, I've been monitoring the situation. I know they've found you. Sir, I need backup, real backup, not MPs, not agents who might be compromised. I need people I can trust absolutely, people who know how to fight. Stone was quiet for a long moment. Catherine, if I send official support, I expose the operation. Foster's testimony becomes inadmissible. The conspiracy wins. Then send unofficial support. You've been in the military for 40 years, sir. You must know people, retired operators, veterans who owe you favors, people who still remember what loyalty means. What you're asking for is a private army, Catherine. I'm asking for soldiers who still believe in protecting their own. I'm asking for the old guard, sir, the ones they've forgotten about, the ones they've pushed aside. Let them remember what they fought for. Stone exhaled slowly. There's a group, veterans from my early days in the Rangers. They meet once a month at a bar in Arlington. They call themselves the Last Watch. Most of them are in their 60s and 70s, Kate. They're not the warriors they used to be. Neither am I, sir, but we're still here, and sometimes experience beats youth. Catherine looked at Ryan, still sleeping, trusting her to keep him alive. How fast can you get them here? 30 minutes, maybe less if I tell them one of their own needs help. Stone paused. Catherine, you understand what you're asking? These men and women, they've earned their peace, they've done their time, and you're calling them back to war. I'm giving them a choice, sir, something nobody gave us when we were young. They can stay home, stay safe, stay forgotten. Or they can stand up one more time and prove that old soldiers still matter. I'll make the calls. Kate, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You could have stayed on that bus. You could have walked away, but you didn't. You never do. The line went dead. Catherine turned to Carlos. We have 30 minutes to turn this clinic into a fortress. Can you do it? Carlos grinned, and for a moment she saw the young ranger she'd served with decades ago. Kate, I've been preparing for this since the day I opened this place. You think I set up a clinic for veterans without thinking about security? Follow me. He led her through the basement, showing her what looked like an ordinary clinic, but was actually something more. Reinforced doors, security cameras hidden in smoke detectors, a cache of weapons in a locked cabinet disguised as a supply closet, exit routes through the building's old tunnel system that connected to neighboring properties. Carlos, you magnificent bastard, Catherine whispered. Paranoia isn't a disorder when they're really out to get you. I've been treating vets with PTSD for 10 years. I've seen what happens when the system fails them. I knew someday someone might come for one of my patients. I just didn't think it would be this dramatic. They spent the next 20 minutes preparing. Carlos woke his other patients and gave them a choice: evacuate through the tunnels or stay and help defend. 6 of them chose to stay. They were broken in body but not in spirit veterans who'd been discarded by a society that only valued them during recruitment speeches. There was Marcus, 67, missing his left leg below the knee, but steady with a rifle. Elena, 63, a former Army nurse with shrapnel scars across her back. James, 70, a Marine who'd lost most of his hearing to an IED, but could still read lips and shoot straight. 3 others, each carrying their own wounds, their own stories, their own reasons for refusing to run. At 5:15 a.m., the front door opened. Catherine tensed, weapon raised, until she saw who was entering. General Stone came first, still in civilian clothes, followed by 6 people who looked like they belonged in a retirement home, not a firefight. But their eyes told a different story. These were the Last Watch, and they moved with the careful precision of people who'd fought in jungles and deserts, who'd seen friends die and empires fall, who'd been told they were obsolete but had never quite believed it. Stone made introductions quickly. Catherine Hayes, meet what's left of my old Ranger unit. This is Rosa Martinez, 61 sniper with 2 tours in Desert Storm. Thomas Chen, 68 demolitions expert from Vietnam. Victor Okonkwo, 59 communications specialist from the Gulf War. Sarah Blackwell, 65 combat medic from Panama. David Kim, 72 reconnaissance from Korea. And Margaret Sullivan, 64 intelligence analyst from Cold War operations. Catherine looked at them, this collection of senior citizens who society had relegated to shuffleboard and early bird specials, and saw something else entirely. She saw warriors. Thank you for coming, she said simply. I won't lie to you about what we're facing. Professional contractors, probably former special operations tasked with killing a Navy SEAL who has evidence of massive corruption. They've given us until 6 a.m. to surrender him. We're not going to do that. So in about 40 minutes, they're going to come through those doors with everything they have. Good, Rosa said, her voice carrying a slight accent. I was getting bored with bingo night. Thomas grinned. My grandkids keep telling me I'm too old for excitement. Time to prove them wrong. Stone pulled Catherine aside while the others began setting up positions under Carlos's direction. Kate, I've brought what I can without triggering official channels. Body armor, weapons, ammunition, medical supplies. But once the shooting starts, you're on your own. I can't call in backup. I can't get you extracted. If this goes wrong, then it goes wrong, sir. But at least we'll go down fighting for something that matters. That's more than a lot of people get. Stone gripped her shoulder. Your wife would be proud of you, Kate. Claire always said you had the biggest heart of anyone she'd ever met. She'd love that you're still saving lives even when it costs you everything. The mention of Claire hit Catherine like a physical blow. She'd been dead for 3 years, cancer the enemy that couldn't be fought with tactics, or courage that didn't care about training or experience. Catherine had held her hand at the end, helpless for the first time in her life, unable to do the one thing she'd been trained for, keep someone alive. Claire would tell me I'm an idiot for getting involved, Catherine said softly, and then she'd ask if I needed help. Exactly. Stone checked his watch. 5:30. They'll come at 600 right on schedule. Standard doctrine. They've given a deadline to create psychological pressure to make you panic and make mistakes. Don't give them the satisfaction. The next 30 minutes passed in tense preparation. Rosa took a position on the second floor with her rifle, the best overwatch they could manage. Thomas rigged the main entrances with improvised charges, not lethal, but enough to slow down any breach. Victor set up a communications hub monitoring police scanners and government channels for any sign that official forces were being mobilized. The others took positions throughout the building, creating interlocking fields of fire. Catherine stayed with Ryan. He'd woken during the preparations, and despite his injuries, he'd insisted on being moved to a wheelchair where he could at least observe and advise. You should have left me, he said as Catherine checked his chest tube. Gone dark disappeared. Instead, you've gathered a retirement home full of veterans to die protecting me. First, they're not going to die. Second, they chose to be here. Nobody forced them. Catherine adjusted his IV. And third, Ryan, you're not the only reason we're doing this. Every person in this building has been forgotten, dismissed, told they don't matter anymore. This is their chance to prove everyone wrong. Don't take that away from them. At 5:58 a.m., Victor's radio crackled. We have movement. 4 vehicles blacked out, approaching from cardinal directions. Count 12 tangos, full tactical gear. They're not hiding anymore, Kate. They're coming in loud. Catherine moved to the main room where the last watch had assembled. These old soldiers looked at her with steady eyes, waiting for orders, and she felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like an old familiar coat. Here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice calm and clear. They'll try the doors first. Thomas's charges will discourage that. Then they'll breach the windows. That's when Rosa takes her shots not to kill, but to make them respect our position. They'll pull back, reassess, maybe try to negotiate. That's when we make our offer. They leave. We won't press charges. They stay, things get ugly. And when they don't leave, Elena asked, then we show them that old doesn't mean helpless. We use this building, we use our experience, we use their overconfidence against them. They think they're up against a scared nurse and a wounded SEAL. They have no idea what they're actually facing. At 6:00 a.m. exactly, a voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. Catherine Hayes, Commander Foster, you have 60 seconds to come out with your hands up. This doesn't have to end badly. Catherine picked up a bullhorn that Carlos had produced from his seemingly endless supply of equipment. She walked to the window, staying behind cover, and responded. This is Colonel Catherine Hayes, United States Army Rangers, retired. The man you're trying to kill is under my protection. He's a wounded soldier and a witness to federal crimes. If you want him, you're going to have to come through me and everyone else in this building. And I promise you, that's not going to be as easy as you think. There was a pause. Then the voice came back, but this time there was uncertainty in it. Colonel Hayes, we have authorization from the highest levels. Interfering with our operation is a federal offense. So is trying to murder a Navy SEAL. So is defense contractor fraud. So is conspiracy. You want to add up federal offenses, we can do this all day, or you can walk away, Tell your bosses that the target is too protected and everyone goes home alive. Your choice. You have 60 seconds. Catherine stepped back from the window. Rosa's voice came through the radio. Kate, they're not withdrawing. They're moving into breach positions. Copy that. Everyone to your stations. Remember, we're not trying to kill them. We're trying to survive long enough for the truth to come out. Controlled fire defensive positions, and for God's sake, don't be heroes. We're too old for that nonsense. The first explosion came at 6:03 a.m. Thomas's charge at the front door triggered by a pressure plate. The blast wasn't massive, but it was enough to throw the breach team backward, ears ringing, confidence shaken. Rosa took her shot through a second-floor window, hitting the pavement 6 inches from the team leader's foot. A warning, not an attack. The contractors pulled back, regrouping. Catherine used the breathing room to check on her people. Everyone was in position, alert but calm. These weren't panicked civilians. These were veterans who'd been in worse situations and survived. Carlos appeared at her elbow. Kate, I just got off the phone with some friends in the Alexandria PD. They're hearing reports of gunfire. They're going to have to respond. How long? 10 minutes? Maybe 15. That's our window. We hold for 10 minutes and then this becomes a public incident. They can't operate in public. They'll have to withdraw. But the contractors weren't giving them 10 minutes. The second assault came from multiple directions simultaneously. Flashbangs through windows, breaching charges on the reinforced back door, suppressing fire from across the street. They were done with subtlety. The basement erupted into controlled chaos. Catherine's defenders returned fire, not wild spraying, but careful aimed shots designed to keep the attackers at bay. Marcus, the one-legged Marine, was positioned at the stairwell, and when 2 contractors tried to rush down, he dropped them both with shots to their body armor, non-lethal, but definitely persuasive. Elena, despite her age and injuries, moved through the building like a ghost appearing behind breaching teams to fire shots that sent them scrambling for cover. James, the deaf Marine, used his disability as an advantage, unaffected by the flashbangs that disoriented everyone else. But the contractors were good and they were determined. One team managed to breach the eastern wall, pouring through a window that Thomas's charges hadn't covered. Catherine found herself face to face with 3 armed men in tactical gear, their weapons trained on her. The old instincts took over. She dropped low using a medical card as cover and came up with her weapon aimed at the lead contractor's center mass. I don't want to kill you, she said, but I will if you take one more step. The contractor laughed. Lady, you're, what, 50? You really think you can take 3 of us? No, Catherine said, but I don't have to take 3 of you. I just have to take you. And your friends have to decide if their paycheck is worth watching you die. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder, and the contractor's radio crackled with urgent commands. All units withdraw. Police response incoming. Withdraw now. The 3 contractors backed toward the window, weapons still raised. This isn't over, Colonel. You're protecting a dead man. It's just a matter of time. Then I guess we'll see you again, Catherine said. But next time, bring more friends. You're going to need them. They disappeared through the window. Within seconds, the sounds of vehicles pulling away filled the morning air. The assault was over, lasting less than 8 minutes, but it had felt like hours. Catherine lowered her weapon and looked around. Her defenders were emerging from their positions, checking themselves for injuries, the adrenaline still pumping. Incredibly miraculously, everyone was alive. Banged up, ears ringing, but alive. Sound off, she called. Casualties. One by one, her people reported in. Minor injuries, nothing serious. Rosa had taken some flying glass from a shattered window. Thomas had wrenched his back diving for cover. But they'd held. The last watch had proven that old soldiers still knew how to fight. The police arrived 4 minutes later, finding a basement full of senior citizens who claimed they'd been attacked by home invaders and defended themselves. Carlos, as the property owner, handled most of the questions, while Catherine stayed with Ryan, who'd watched the entire fight from his wheelchair with something like awe on his face. That was incredible, he said as Catherine checked his vitals, making sure the excitement hadn't reopened his wounds. You coordinated 7 civilians against 12 trained contractors and won. They weren't civilians, Ryan. They were veterans, and we didn't win. We survived. There's a difference. Kate. He caught her hand. Stop diminishing what you did. You took people society had thrown away and gave them purpose. You reminded them that they still matter. That's worth more than any tactical victory. Before Catherine could respond, her phone rang. General Stone. She answered, stepping away for privacy. Catherine, I just got word. Senator Chase is calling for a full investigation into the incident at the clinic. He's claiming you kidnapped a military asset and endangered civilians. He's going to try to discredit Foster's testimony by painting you as a rogue operative. Let him try, sir. Everything we did was in defense of a witness to federal crimes. We have recordings, we have evidence, and now we have a dozen contractors who attacked a civilian clinic in broad daylight. Senator Chase might control the narrative, but he doesn't control the truth. There's more. Dr. Preston Chase has been arrested. Someone sent an anonymous tip to the FBI about his involvement in the earlier assassination attempt. They found evidence on his laptop communications with the contractors, payment records, everything. He's talking Catherine. He's giving up his father to save himself. Catherine felt something close to satisfaction. Then the conspiracy is unraveling. Quickly, Defense Secretary wants Foster's testimony on record immediately. I'm sending a proper security detail, legitimate this time. You did your job, Colonel. You kept him alive long enough for the truth to come out. Now it's time to let the system take over. What about the people who helped us, the last watch, Carlos, the veterans in the clinic? Heroes, every one of them. I'm recommending commendations, though they'll have to be classified. But Kate, they know. They know they mattered. That's what you gave them. That's what you've always given people. 6 weeks later, Catherine stood in front of a classroom at St. Michael's Medical Center. The room was full of young nurses and doctors, the next generation of medical professionals, and they were all looking at her with varying degrees of curiosity and respect. The hospital had offered her a position not as a supply clerk, not as a floor nurse, but as Director of Combat Medicine Integration, a newly created role designed to train civilian medical staff in trauma techniques developed in military medicine. David Morrison, the administrator who'd fired her, had been forced to resign when his role in covering up Preston Chase's activities came to light. The new administration had practically begged Catherine to return. Most of you will never see combat, Catherine began, her voice carrying easily through the room. But someday you'll face a situation where everything goes wrong, where the patient is dying, where protocol doesn't work, where you have to make a choice, follow the rules and watch them die, or break the rules and maybe save them. She paused, looking at the young faces watching here. Lily Park was in the front row now, Catherine's deputy director. Dr. Vincent Cruz sat in the back, having requested a transfer to Catherine's program. Even some of the residents who'd mocked her were present, humbled and eager to learn. I'm here to teach you how to make that choice, and how to live with it after. A young doctor raised his hand. Colonel Hayes, is it true you fought off 12 attackers to protect a patient? Catherine smiled slightly. I didn't do it alone. I had help from people society had forgotten. Veterans in their 60s and 70s who proved that experience and courage don't have expiration dates. That's the real lesson I want you to learn. Never underestimate someone because of their age or appearance. The most valuable people in this hospital aren't always the ones with the most impressive credentials. After the class ended, Catherine found General Stone waiting in the hallway. He was in dress uniform and his expression was serious. Colonel Hayes, I have a request. It's irregular and you have every right to refuse. What is it, sir? The Pentagon wants to establish a new training program. Combat medics transitioning to civilian practice, civilian medical personnel, learning military trauma techniques. They want you to head it. Full colonel rank, active duty, your own facility. It would mean coming out of retirement officially. Catherine looked out the window at the hospital parking lot. She could see the last watch gathered near the entrance. They'd started meeting here once a week, volunteering, mentoring young veterans, refusing to fade away quietly. Carlos was with them, laughing at something Rosa had said. Ryan Foster, fully recovered, was scheduled to visit later that day. I appreciate the offer, General, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. The military has plenty of colonels. What it needs is someone to bridge the gap between military and civilian medicine, to teach young doctors that there's more to saving lives than following protocols, to show them that sometimes the best medical intervention is simply refusing to give up. Stone nodded, a small smile on his face. I expected you'd say that. For what it's worth, Kate, you've done more for military medicine in the past 6 weeks than most people do in a career. Foster's testimony brought down 47 people, including a senator and 3 Pentagon officials. The $2 billion in fraudulent spending is being recovered. And you reminded a lot of old soldiers that they still have value. That's worth more than any rank. After Stone left, Catherine returned to her office. On the wall was a photograph, the only one she'd allowed them to hang. It showed the last watch standing in front of the clinic, 7 old veterans and 1 old nurse, all smiling, all alive, or all still fighting in their own way. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Dinner tonight, I owe you about 1,000 thank yous, and I figured I'd start paying them off one meal at a time." Catherine smiled and typed back, "Only if you're buying. Saving your life twice has to be worth at least a decent steak." As she shut down her computer for the day, Catherine caught her reflection in the dark screen. She saw gray hair, yes, wrinkles definitely, the face of a 52-year-old woman who'd been through hell and back. But she also saw something else. She saw purpose. She saw value. She saw a soldier who'd finally found her way home. The phone rang one more time. Unknown number. Catherine almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Colonel Hayes." The voice was young, female, urgent. "My name is Lieutenant Sarah Chen. I'm currently deployed in Syria and we have a situation. Multiple casualties, improvised medical facility, and I'm the most experienced medic on site. I've read your file, ma'am. I've studied your techniques. And right now I need your help walking me through a procedure I've never done before. There's a soldier dying, and you're the only person I know who's been in this exact situation." Catherine grabbed a notepad and pen. "Talk to me, Lieutenant. What are we dealing with?" As the young medic described the situation, Catherine felt that old familiar calm settle over her. This was who she was. Not a supply clerk, not a relic, not someone to be dismissed and forgotten. She was the silent guardian. And as long as soldiers needed her, as long as lives hung in the balance, as long as there was one more person to save, she would be there. "All right, Lieutenant," Catherine said, her voice steady and sure. "Here's what you're going to do. First, take a breath. You're trained for this. You're ready. Now let's save a life together." And in that moment, in an office in a Virginia hospital, Colonel Catherine Hayes did what she'd always done. She reached across distance and doubt and fear, and she pulled someone back from the edge. Because that's what guardians do. They stand watch. They refuse to quit. They remember that every life matters, every soldier deserves a chance, and experience will always be worth more than arrogance. The sun set over St. Michael's Medical Center, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. In her office, Catherine talked a young medic through a life-saving procedure. In the parking lot, the last watch shared stories and laughter. In a federal courthouse, Ryan Foster's testimony continued to bring down a corrupt empire. And somewhere in the world, another old soldier who'd been told they didn't matter anymore saw the news, saw the story of the silent guardian, and remembered that they still had something to offer. The fight wasn't over. It never really ended. But for the first time in 10 years, Catherine Hayes wasn't running from it anymore. She was exactly where she belonged,